right. I'd like to call to order the March 5th meeting of the New Canaan Board of Education. Before you, you have the minutes from our February 26th meeting. If you could take a look at those, and when you've had a chance, if I could get someone to motion to approve those minutes. Sherry, second. Brendan, all those in favor? It's everyone except for the, okay, thank you. Moving on to review and approve of the agenda. Tonight's agenda. We'd like to add the Resources Committee budget update with Mr. Hayes. If I could get someone to motion to add that, to amend the, Sherry, second. Hazel, all those in favor? It's unanimous, thank you. Okay. And then if I could get a motion to approve the amended agenda. Katrina, second. Jen, all those in favor?
I have a question.
Yes.
Am I allowed to ask questions before we vote?
If I recognize you, yes.
Okay. Two things. In light of the CABE guidance that just came out about the student youth walkout, they sent a letter today expressing that it is political. Can we add this to the agenda?
We have to vote on it. So I have, do you want to make a motion to add that to the agenda?
I would like to make a motion to add the guidance from CABE and the implications regarding the National Youth Walkout.
Do I have a second? Seeing no second, then we.
Can I just make a
Yes.
comment? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not something that I don't think, at least I haven't reviewed, so to
Okay.
the extent we talk about it, I'd actually like to review it first.
I haven't
Okay.
even read my emails yet.
Yeah.
We didn't get anything in the emails today, so.
I didn't get anything.
But
Okay.
I'm not
All right.
against talking about it, but
Okay.
I'd
No, I'm not
like
either.
to actually,
All right, so we'll,
Yeah.
why don't we, we'll, I guess because it is a little premature, nobody has the information that you're discussing, so maybe we can, Dr. Lutzy, if we can take a look at that, and we'll talk about it another time, so. Okay, so,
It was sent to school superintendents and school board chairpersons.
Okay.
So nobody else has it.
um,
I'm a
Did it
CABE
come
representative,
today?
that's how I have
when did
it.
it come?
Did it come today?
Today?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I've been in meetings all day today, so I didn't see it yet, so it's a little premature,
But the March is March 14th. I think it's before we meet next.
Okay, well, I don't know if we have, in light of, I mean, I've been in meetings today, so I didn't even
I
have a
didn't
chance
either.
to look at my email, so,
Right, so our next meeting is the 19th with the board,
okay.
and they're talking about,
All right, so.
right, for the
but
14th.
what-
Okay.
I guess what,
To discuss it, we have to put it on, and so we're not going to discuss it, we have to have a discussion, I mean, you can have a discussion about if we want to add it to tonight's agenda, or if we want to do it in a different forum, if we want to have a special meeting to discuss it. You know,
Because it is the 14th, so if we don't
Yeah.
do it tonight, then we have to do a special.
yeah, I don't, does anyone have any thoughts on,
I guess, has the administration had a chance to see this?
the email?
Just having an off-the-cuff discussion when we haven't really had a chance to think about it deeply, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Right,
Makes sense,
not
but
the
it's
CABE.
certainly a topic that I'm interested in.
Sure, sure. The specific CABE guidance, I have not had a chance to read through, to be honest. So I have not, if it did go to superintendents and board chairs, I've not had a chance to send it on to the high school administration yet, or the middle school administration, I think, or, anyway. But I know it has, but it is something that is being discussed at the high school. And I know that Mr. Egan has been meeting with students and discussing the participation and what it might look like, what that might be. I can give a little bit of an update there, but I can't give specific to the CABE guidance because, you know, I haven't
Well, I mean, I
seen
understand
that.
it wouldn't be fair if nobody else has seen this, so
Yeah,
it's
so why
not-
don't I make the suggestion that, you know, I mean, if it came today, I'll take a look at it, Dr. Lutzy will take a look at it, and then why don't we report back via email to the board, or, you know, forward
Well,
that on?
I certainly can forward it on to
Yeah.
to board
Yeah.
members
Okay.
and read, and then can
Yeah, and if,
ascertain
if we
there's-
need to have a special meeting, or if, you know, we can,
Next
after it's,
steps based
yeah,
on that. We'll
yeah,
figure out what-
that would be great.
Next steps with the board
Okay.
from there.
Sure,
Okay.
that sounds
Okay.
good.
All right, so let's, so
I hate to do this.
Moving
but
on. Okay.
As part of discussion, I also had a question about the agenda. Is
Okay.
it okay to ask that now?
Sure.
In the Friday updates, we had what normally looks like something that would be on our consent agenda, the resignations. Is that different than, there were several maternity leaves, a resignation, retirements in the Friday minutes, and I was wondering if they would be on the agenda as a consent agenda, as I've seen in the past, like a vote.
I think we decided that
Sure.
we were moving.
we
it
changed
to
that
the-
procedure.
We
Yeah,
changed
we
that,
did.
yeah.
Right, so back in the fall, in September, on guidance from our attorney, we made a decision, I think the board made a decision for resignations, for the superintendent to accept those resignations on behalf of the board. That recommendation was given in part because of the time that can elapse between the resignation and a Board of Education meeting, so that the district and the person resigning could finish that work back and forth with each other as expeditiously as possible.
Okay, so they won't be on the agenda.
So they'll still be informed, and we'll still do leaves of absences. I think we're still doing those for the most part. And if those were on,
Well, they
we
were-
generally do. Were those in the?
Maternity, yeah, there were
A maternity,
several
those generally
maternities.
would be. Friday was such an upside-down day that perhaps, they may have found their way into the update to the board instead of to the agenda. So if that's the case in the future, we do look to put those on. It's more the time-sensitive things, and primarily it's the resignations.
Okay, just clarifying.
Okay. So we have one amendment with the addition of the Resource Committee update. If I could get a motion to approve the agenda as amended. And I think, yeah, we had Katrina and then Jen. Okay, so all those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. All right. Moving on to comments from the public. To ensure the public's right to be heard, the board has set aside time during the meeting for public comments. 2 minutes will be allotted to each speaker and a maximum of 15 minutes to each subject. Do I have anyone wishing to address the board this evening? Sure. If you could introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Karen Willett. I have 2 students, a 6th grader at Saks and a kindergartner at West. I know you're in the midst of important and very time-consuming budget discussions, so I just want to first reiterate my thanks and appreciation for all that you do for our kids. Speaking of the budget, I've actually listened to Dr. Lutzie's presentation, more than once, actually. Did not fall asleep, so thanks for keeping it interesting. And in the presentation, he rightly highlights a few of our top rankings. Niche.com, for example, rates New Canaan's district #1. And so since I see everything through the lens of later start, it made me wonder, what are the start times in the #1 districts in other states? And I just specifically did niche.com because that's one that we listed. So I did a quick research, and I went by population, so the top 14, and I have a very small chart that I'll hand out if I can approach the bench.
You can,
Yeah, why don't you hand it?
Karen, why don't you, here,
Yeah.
leave them with me.
Yeah, and then we'll
Oh,
pass
yeah.
it down.
Thanks, thank you.
And so Dr. Lutzie also rightly often says that, the district wants to be on the cutting edge and not the bleeding edge of our, which I take to mean we want to do evidence-based things, and we want them to be tested. So this isn't scientific data by any means. This is my quick, Google searching. But I think it kind of could ease our minds a bit about being too early to adopt. So, for example, of the 14 most populous states, and I would have done them all, but I don't have an intern, so it would have taken me forever.
Heather's here, you could have an intern.
Could I hire one of those?
Sorry.
The high school start times, the only states that don't start after 8 o'clock, and it should be noted that they start not at 7:30, but at 7:50, 55, and 45, are Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Georgia. And Michigan I'll throw in there too, because they only have 2 days of the week that are later start.
I'm sorry.
Okay, just give me 1 second. Just, sorry, it's 2 minutes, so just.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Wrap it up.
Sorry.
I know, sorry.
Okay. That's all. That's the end of the chart. So the vast majority of the top districts in the top 14 most populous states start after 8 o'clock, most of them after 8:30.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board?
Good for her.
Thank you. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to reports and recognition and the senior internship update with Ms. Bianco.
Yes, as you'll recall, last year, Ms. Bianco was hired as our senior internship coordinator. She did present with us, with the board last year, and she reminded me that that presentation was the same night as our retiree night and awards night. And so she just very kindly asked if she would go first tonight instead of going after the retirees and the awards. And I said, absolutely. So we're thrilled to have Heather here to give us an update on our burgeoning senior internship program.
Great, thank you. So as you know, my name is Heather Bianco, and I coordinate the senior internship program. This year, we have 93% of our seniors participating in the internship program. So obviously, that's grown quite a bit. We will have 288 members of the class of 2018 go out on their internships on May 22nd. So I'm just going to go through some statistics for this year. Out of the 288 seniors participating in the program, 99 this year decided to self-design. This means they found their own internship under our set parameters. Each self-designed internship that was presented to us was vetted out to ensure it was within a reasonable distance of New Canaan and it was legitimate company organization. With that, we had 276 positions that were available for the remaining 189 students who did not self-design. So that was an unbelievable surplus of 87 internship positions this year, which we've never had before. So we have a huge surplus, which is fantastic. So hold on one second, let's make sure I have the charts. As you're aware, the program has grown from 12 students to 288 students in 8 years. So up on the chart is when we started, you can see. So please take a look at the chart. We have over 30 categories of internships this year. The most popular this year is marketing, as you can see, business, health science, nonprofits, and of course the New Canaan school system. So if everyone has that chart, you can take a look. We have many new sites this year, just to name a few. We have Peapod Graphic Design, Connecticut Junior Rangers Hockey Club, Darien Ice House, Quick Center for the Arts, the Palace Theater in Stamford, and the New Canaan First Selectman Office. And we have a lot more, but I wasn't going to go through all of them. As in past years, the process has been the same. Applications were available November 27th through December 12th. The self-design deadline was December 18th. Interviews were conducted in January. All students were interviewed by at least 2 SIP committee members. And this year we did something a little bit different. Based on interest stated in their application and each student's interview, we matched students based on their choices of their internship positions. This year was the first year students were able to see available internship positions, and the students ranked them in the internships they were interested in, which is really fantastic because that just, you know, not only is the committee picking for them, but they get to see, and that really helps us, you know, enable them to get the right position. So just to give you some stats on that, I thought was really interesting. 112 students received their first choice, 42 received their second choice, 17 received their third choice, and 18 received their fourth choice or lower. We feel this was a better system placing students since they can drive their choices based on their rankings. In preparation for the internship experience, all SIP students are required to attend 2 training sessions and a presentation by Ben Carpenter, the author of the book, The Bigs, which addresses career exploration, the basics of being successful in your career, and he was here last year as well. We will break the students into 2 training sessions of approximately 144 students per session. In each session, a team leader will train 10 to 12 students at a table. Team leaders are members of the SIP committee, school counselors, and other staff members who have served as mentors in the past. In our 2 training sessions, we'll create LinkedIn accounts, discuss workplace etiquette, dress code, proper use of email, managing relationships and communication with colleagues and superiors, confidentiality of work product, employee social media, sexual harassment, and all types of pre-internship information. And I provided you an outline. You can take a peek to see what we're going to go through. And that outline is for the team leaders, not for the students, just to guide them through. And we'll also have, I'll have pre-meetings with all the team leaders to go over everything that they need to discuss. Obviously, I'll be present that day, and so will Mr. Hoffman. The day begins. Seniors attend an assembly with the author Ben Carpenter, and our last session of creating LinkedIn accounts will occur. During internships, interns are required to maintain a reflective journal about their experience and what they are learning about as themselves as workers. They'll receive a weekly prompt to answer the questions, and the mentor will actually read it and respond to them. Just as in past years, the SIP committee has been a huge help in getting new sites for this year, training and brainstorming new ideas. So our committee meets every month at the first Wednesday of the month in the Career Center. We meet for about an hour. In preparation for next year, we do need additional internships for finance, engineering, and animal care. Those are the three that the students really wanted this year, which we were lacking. So finance is big. In June, when we send out surveys, we will ask parents if they have any friends or colleagues in these areas of interest to help us out. For the remaining 7% of students that will not be participating, we plan on the following activities: helping students create LinkedIn accounts, resume and cover letter workshops, and mock interviews. And all students will be participating in the Ben Carpenter Assembly, and they'll all receive a book on May 21st. So I do want to mention last year's school survey. So this is the 2016-17 school survey. This is for the student survey. So this went to the students. Was your internship assignment related to your career interests? 32% said strongly agree, 45% agree, and 16% said disagree. Were the presentations on workplace standards helpful? 13% strongly agree, 59% agree, 19% disagree. Students that found the Biggs presentation helpful, 74% said yes, that's why we're bringing back, and about 24% said no. Internship met students' expectations. 45% strongly agree, 47% agree, and 7% disagree. We're asking, would the students prefer to design your own internship? 52% said no, 23% already created their own, and 23% yes. And did they find the weekly journal questions valuable too? 43% said yes, 57% said no. And just quickly, the parent survey, did you find your child gained valuable experience? 83% said yes, 2% said no, 13% were unsure. Did your child share their daily tasks with you? 66 yes, 1.3 no, 21% sometimes. So this survey information was helpful in making the decision on our training with the students, as we did communicate early this past September. Students can self-design their internship with their guidelines. So the third week of September, I sent emails out to parents, students, letting them know they can self-design, giving them plenty of time. So I think that probably upped us to 99 students self-designing. Since 57% of students did not feel the journal questions were valuable for reflection, the committee will look at our questions from last year and make changes. That's really it. So thank you for the opportunity to share our program with you tonight. Our reception will be at the end of the year in the auditorium on June 15th, and I hope you all can come, 5 p.m. Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bianco.
Yeah.
Do I have anyone who'd like?
Sure.
Jen?
So I'm so excited about this program. I think it's so great. I actually have a senior this year, so I get to experience it firsthand.
Oh, good.
Yeah, but the way it's grown and all the work that you guys put into it and the creativity and all the different internships, it's really, really cool. The one thing that I will say is, so I have, again, a senior, and academically, first semester senior is so crazy. I don't know, do you tell them about the self-designed internship? I know for my son, it was between all the college essays and whatever.
Right,
he just, that was just can't even deal with that.
Right.
So I don't know if you would ever consider bringing that up at an earlier point, that they have more time to just kind of mull it over. I don't know when it was brought up.
Yeah, it was the second week of the school year, so it was September.
Yeah,
and then
I have a boy also.
Yeah.
So, yeah. He told me about it in November.
Oh my goodness. To be honest, I sent them probably 5 to 6 emails,
But no, so I'm really excited to see how it turns out. So
Okay,
it's
thank
great.
you.
So thank you so much.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Thank you. Anyone else? Sherry?
So first, Heather, I just want to say you've done a fantastic job in such a short amount of time.
Thank you.
This is a great program. Actually, I can say that as an intern employer. Last year, we had my nonprofit organization had 2 New Canaan High School interns. We also had a Stanford High School intern, and so I was able to compare and contrast our program with the Stanford's program. And beyond any metric, the New Canaan High School program was much more prepared in terms of the pre-training that they were giving to their interns, the workplace training, the LinkedIn, the dress code, the social media. So the New Canaan High School interns were able to hit the ground running on day one.
Okay.
And then just the ongoing communication from your office as well as the mentoring and the mentors that checked in with the interns throughout the program, I thought was extremely helpful just to
Good.
make sure that they were kind of following the path of development as intended by the program. I guess my one question is for the remaining 7%, I'm just curious why they didn't opt into this program, and is the goal getting 100% of each grade out into this, into the internship
I mean, we would
program?
hope that everyone would want to participate. I mean, some students, they just I didn't talk to everybody, but the students that I did talk to, I had a couple that dropped out, 3 or 4, that just said, no, I don't want to do it. I just want to stay in school, and they could have other things going on in their life. I didn't, really get into it with them. That was just the 3 or 4 I spoke to. So,
But we had talked about this last year, just the worry about those that are left behind.
Right.
We've kind of tipped at some point in the last few years, once we get the
Yeah.
majority of the class left out into the program, the quality of the educational experience for those left behind. I'm just curious how we can address that, or what the kind of longer term
Yeah.
strategy is to
Yeah,
addressing
I'll
that.
let Mr. Rothman just talk to that. I mean, like we said, we are going to offer them different things, mocked, interviews, resume, cover letter, LinkedIn, all that stuff. But I'll let Ari speak to.
There is actually a great deal of counseling that goes on for those kids in terms of whether they become involved or not. A handful of them need to stay in order to make sure that they graduate. So there is an informed choice that it really is not in their best interest. They're not going to have enough work done, or they're not successful enough by the May cutoff date, and therefore graduation becomes a priority. That's a small group. What has happened last year, and more is being done this year, is as we speak, the teachers who have primarily seniors are getting together and planning mostly interdisciplinary activities. There's always been a tradition, for instance, after AP exams, for the teachers of AP courses to do very specific projects that the AP curricula don't always allow for. What happened last year, and what is actually in the works now as we speak, is planning to do a lot more of that. I may have 2 kids left in a class, Heather may have 3 kids left in a class. Totally different subjects, but we're creating something that's meaningful, that is not just filler, but actually extending the curriculum of our courses, but on a higher level. So it's much more project-based. And as I said, for a small handful of kids, instruction continues. But there's a lot of thought put into, because now so many kids are not in the building, those staff members are actually working both as mentors, but also taking on more creative teaching responsibilities.
Other questions? Penny?
Well, this might be more for you, Ari, but, so don't sit down yet. I guess one of the things that, actually, I think another parent had asked me, is with so many students doing the program, and it even being higher this year than last year, is there sort of untapped faculty time that we should think as a district about projects that we could have the faculty do that, who might not have as much work teaching during that time period? Without putting any undue burdens on anybody, but just taking advantage of the situation.
It's difficult to answer in terms of how many are really completely free, meaning all their students are gone, simply because I tend to think that it used to be English and social studies were grade specific. So for instance, in science and math, you may lose seniors, but you can have students from across the board. So therefore, you're not going to lose your class per se. And even as we've opened up in social studies more electives to juniors, the reality is that you're not going to have a class of 1 or 2 kids being only the seniors who are behind. So I really couldn't tell you specifically what is going to happen in terms of the exact numbers of sections of classes where they will have no kids or very few kids. I do know that the expectation has been put out, and it's going to be a little more than an expectation, that if you are someone who has very few or no kids left in a section, you're taking on mentoring responsibilities. Because for every one of these kids, the beauty of our program is an ongoing contact between a mentor and the site supervisor and the intern.
Can one of you speak just briefly to the responsibilities of those mentors?
As one who has ended up with a good number of mentees, and it's fun. It's fun. The responsibilities begin with, obviously, meeting with each of the kids before they start, going over their expectations, making sure they're very clear on what the roles are going to be, reinforcing what is done in the training. It's an ongoing discussion. You know, you're both a resource to that person, an anchor back into the building. There is weekly, per mentee, if you will, an ongoing dialogue through this Google Doc of prompting questions, asking them to reflect on their experience, what they learned from the training, to what extent is that actually playing out, their responses. So that's a weekly thing. Plus, as many visits as you can schedule, minimum at least one, but more often more than that, to actually go on site, watch them, talk to them, get a sense of seeing what they're doing as opposed to just what is being written back and forth.
Thank you.
Hazel?
I just have a question about maybe going back a couple years after we've had this go through so many times and been so successful. Have we heard from any of the kids that they've been in their real job, their first job experience, and remembered something that happened that they key upon, and maybe you could pass on to the kids that are sitting there listening today? In other words, the ones that had jobs, their
Yeah.
first real job.
It's funny you say that. So there is a young lady that she works at the elementary school. We're actually having her as a speaker for our end of year reception to everyone, because it's full circle. So now she was an intern, she was a student intern, and now she's a teacher with an intern. So we're gonna have her come speak. And on one of our training sessions, I think it's the March 21st one, we're gonna have two young adults, 24, 25-year-olds, come back. One was a former student here. She, graduated, went to college, has her own business. She's going to come talk about, our training, going over everything from, how to act at an internship. Because it's always nice to hear from a 24, 25-year-old instead of us sitting at the table going over all this stuff. So it's going to be a little bit different this year. We're actually having two speakers come in to talk to the students.
It's a wonderful
Yeah.
program. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Sherry?
So Heather, just one other kind of question / comment is, now that the program is established and we're in this wonderful position of actually having surplus internship positions, I guess just your thoughts on how we become more strategic on what internships we open to our students, because obviously there's a variation in quality, and
Yes.
like, even because I had interns myself, I kind of heard,
Yeah.
they're like, you're making us work really hard, and we're hearing from some other people, they're not working as hard.
Right.
So, how do you start to get more strategic?
Yeah, so it's funny you say that. So we had a few last year that we actually just removed from the system. There was about 4 that we didn't feel was quality, so they're no longer with us. And, in some calls I get, we don't accept everybody. So we have removed some this year. There were some doozies that we'll never take again. So yeah, we're definitely more strategic with, what we get too. And it's hard too, because sometimes, some of the boys might want, something at a sports fitness place, and and they really, really want it, and you're trying to explain to them that it's really maybe not the most meaningful experience. Yeah.
Sure.
In the early meetings this year, specifically reviewing the experiences of last year, as well as going out and starting to really see a greater variety of sites than we had worked with in the past, there was a lot of discussion. Keep in mind that while Heather and I are in the building, we have 2 school counselors, The rest of the committee are people from the community who are active in business and have been part of this discussion from day one. Something that happened more so this year, and I think is going to grow from year to year, is what I would call almost training or consulting to a possible site as to what the expectation should be. Taking a lot of the feedback that we've gotten directly and indirectly, it really was much more not just, thank you, you're going to host us, but a real substantive discussion in terms of, here's what our program wants. Can you do that? And even in some cases, there are individuals or businesses who don't have enough work in and of themselves. So some of, some have been combined or are being combined.
Yeah, we actually do have one. We have one that's combined.
Can you come to the-
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, yes, please.
Yeah,
We
thank you.
actually do have one that's combined, which I think, and I forgot about that, thanks for reminding me. We have one that's combined at a marketing firm, that we basically took on 3 smaller nonprofits and combined it into one. And our committee member who runs, it's her marketing firm, she will supervise the student that's going to be working on the 3 smaller nonprofits. So we did kind of combine some stuff this year to make it more meaningful. So, thanks for reminding me. Any more questions?
Any more questions? I had one, and one of them is a follow-on to Sherry. So of those 87 internships that we didn't utilize, and, some of them were for, some of them you're happy that we're not reutilizing, but, of the ones that we got that, you may want to use, how are you sort of maintaining that relationship and
Yeah,
making
so-
sure that they might come back?
Yes, so I did have a few phone calls already there's a couple that I really wish we had an intern for. And you never know, things happen, so it's still early in the process, so I reminded them, please don't, let's just wait it out a little bit, wait till the end of March. But, I explained that we did have a surplus of everyone self-designing, so it wasn't anything intentional. There wasn't a reason we didn't, they had a great internship. And the people that I was kind of worried about assured me they'll come back from next year. But I have an open dialogue with them, and you never know. We might end up placing someone with them, so.
And I guess this would just be a suggestion, or, because I too, I had a senior last year and I have a senior this year. And, my child last year was fortunate. She had an internship that, well, she might not have been thinking it was as fortunate, but she had some pretty rigorous hours, and some other students had much less rigorous experiences. And so I would encourage you to continue that monitoring of those internships and maybe encourage more site visits than just one, and,
Yeah.
sort of, I know it's a lot, there's a lot of internships here, I mean,
Right.
200, it's a lot of internships to monitor, but if there's a way that you can kind of look to maybe spread the load on that monitoring
Yeah, agreed.
role, so that we're
Absolutely.
really, making sure that these last few weeks of these students, I know they want a break, but,
I know. What we did change this year, and I should have mentioned, is last year, a lot of, especially smaller businesses, will be like, oh, you know what, you can work on this website from home. Well, we did away with that,
Okay.
and everyone that gets my emails, you'll see that they are not allowed to work from home. And I made that clear to all the companies and organizations. Sherry, you probably saw that, and, Brian, you saw that too. I underlined it, and I told all the students, and we'll reiterate that again. But I think that was the biggest problem I saw last year. If they're working from home, we're not allowing that anymore. If they don't have a place to work, if it's a small business, then they're going to work at the high school in a conference room.
Okay.
And that was very clear. So hopefully that helps that situation out.
Okay. Okay, great. Any other questions? Thank you, Ms.
Okay,
Bianchi.
thank
Yeah,
you.
And thank you, Ari, it's great.
Yeah, thank you both. Heather stepped into a program that was running well, but sort of reaching its capacity in its ability to sort of to manage. And, we know that Sue Carroll did such a wonderful job getting it going, but, they've been working together closely, and that transition to Heather has gone so well that, we're seeing the results now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on to the Resources Committee budget update with Mr. Hayes.
Thank you. So I put together just a few slides that provide some context, not only to our board, but also but also to the community. And I really just wanted to put our budget for 2018, 2019 into broader context, so that, you know, in the midst of all the conversations that are going on about the Board of Ed's budget in relation to things that are going on in the state, in the town, et cetera, there was broader understanding. First page, it's only a few pages, so I'll try to go quick. The first page just shows our budget increase for 2018 and 2019 for two items, which are salaries and healthcare benefits funding, which total about 81% of the total budget. So these are, as everybody knows on this board, but the community should also know, our budget is largely driven by salaries and healthcare expenses. So what I've done is the left-hand bar here is the last 12-month U.S. wage inflation for education, healthcare, and public administration industries, and that's just defined by the Federal Reserve Bank. So that number is 3.55% year over year for the last 12 months. The number in our budget is 3.62%. So, you know, essentially on top of each other. And that's also consistent, I'll talk later on about the town's expectations of over 3% for salaries. On the healthcare front, PwC for 2017 at a 6% trend increase in healthcare. This year for us, our contributions are going up by 5.9%. So also very consistent, and that number last year was 0, but ticked up this year. Next page, if we look at overtime, and this is something that Brian walked through last week with the Board of Finance, overtime, what is the cost performance of the New Canaan Board of Ed relative to its peers. And this looks at the last, on the left-hand side of this page, the last 10 years on a compounded annual basis. All the way over to the left is Darien at 4.6% on an annual basis over the last 10 years. And then you can see New Canaan all the way to the right with the best performance at 3.1% over the last 10 years on an annual basis. What's important is if you actually roll that forward over 10 years, that's over, over 10 percentage points differential between New Canaan and Darien in terms of overall cost increases. So we've done obviously before many of us were here, but done a really good job at controlling costs in this district. And then on the right-hand side of this page, this is something that Brian had in his original budget presentation. This is the net current expenditures per pupil for 2016-2017. The red bar, again, is New Canaan. All of the black bars are the other districts in our DIRG, and New Canaan is right in the middle of the pack on a per pupil basis as well. So performing very well over time from a cost perspective relative to our peers, and frankly average from a per pupil cost perspective. The next slide is looks at over the last 10 years as well, from the 07-08 year to 2017-2018 number of students on the left-hand side of the page, and on the right-hand side of the page, number of employees. There's been 3% growth in number of students, and adjusted number of employees have grown 4%. The adjustments that I've made are what I view as somewhat idiosyncratic. So number one, campus monitors were added, which is a total of 9. And then there's been some insourcing, which is, I think, another 8 for insourcing of support services. And then lastly, special education, which includes transportation as well, which is a total of another 19. So those are numbers that, particularly in special education, change with a relatively small number of students, changing in that area. So we see, after making those adjustments, which I think makes sense, essentially employees growing at the same same level, same percentage over the last 10 years as number of students. The next page, which maybe is my favorite, although somewhat unfortunate when you're trying to address cost reductions, is this looks at the left-hand bar is the total budget increase, excluding any changes in income. Obviously, income changes are relatively small for the Board of Ed, but that number is $3.1 million in total. That's the total cost budget increase from 2017-2018 to 2018-2019. So all this does is it breaks that number down into its component parts. All of the black bars, this is a bridge from the left to the right. The black bars are all contractual. So the first step is teachers' contractual increases. So this is just per their collective bargaining agreement. This is both contract plus step increases. That's $1.3 million. The next one is administrators, that's $75,000. The next one is custodians, that's another $78,000. And then the next is other, which is secretaries and others, other bargaining units and other individuals. That totals $432,000. That includes some estimates because there's some bargaining units that are still in negotiations. The next one is the $760,000 increase related to the Internal Services Fund contribution. And that isn't technically contractual, but that's something that is actuarially based, and it's something that we need to do to properly fund healthcare in the next year. So that's what Joe Spurgeon has talked about on a number of occasions, that we need to fund into our Internal Services Fund to cover employee health care costs. And then the last one is $57,900, which is our transportation contract increase year over year. So the reason for doing this is to show that the lion's share, all but this $361,000 all the way to the right, of the budget increase is either contractual or, in the case of the Internal Services Fund contribution, just required because we need to fund our healthcare costs. So our, if you think about the budget increase, the swing factor really that we're playing with is only about $360,000 on this basis. This next piece really is something that I put together and these next couple of pages are things that I've shared with the town bodies as well. That there's a number of folks in town have asked for this limitation of a 2% increase year over year, and most recently a reduction of our budget increase year over year by $1 million. I wanted to just evaluate the Board of Education budget on the same basis as the Board of Selectmen proposed budget, so I could just understand, what the Board of Selectmen were looking for relative to what the Board of Ed is looking for. So to be able to do that, because they're just two very different organizations, there are two things that need to be done. First is the health insurance funding for both the town and the Board of Ed needs to be removed because that fluctuates. Last year it was 0 for us, year over year increase. This year it's 5%, over 5%. And the town, I think, was in the reverse position. Last year they had an increase, and this year it's actually going down in their proposed budget, which is a huge benefit. So you need to move that out because all that really is doing is funding a balance sheet item year over year. So that's number one. Number two, the budget needs to be, the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed budgets need to be normalized for the fact that the town has a 20 percentage point lower proportion of salaries as compared to the Board of Ed. So the town spends money on a number of things that are roughly 45% of their budget, excluding health care. that are non-salaries, and that number for us is only 25%. So there's a 20% salary-related differential. The reason why that's important is because salaries are growing, beside healthcare costs, salaries are growing more than anything else, over 3% for both the town and for us. And that's just something that it's based on all the bargaining that the town does with their bargaining units, and it's the same thing that we do. But the reality is, as I showed earlier, salaries are growing across the board by over 3%. So when you do that, on page 7, this rolls up on the left-hand side of the page, salaries compares the Board of Selectmen to the Board of Ed, everything else in the middle, and then on the right-hand side of the page, just the total increase with the normalizations that I just described. When you do that, so let's just look at salaries all the way to the left. The differential is Board of Selectmen, not surprising, right, given inflation of 3+% in salaries. The town is expecting a salary increase of over 3%, just over 3%. We, as I said, are expecting 3.62% salary increases, so 0.61% differential. For everything else, excluding healthcare, it's 0.95% for the town and 1.15% for the Board of Ed. In total, that's a 0.5% differential, which applied to the Board of Ed budget is $385,000. So it really doesn't make sense that the town would be asking us for a $1 million reduction in our budget when the reality is we're only $385,000 apart when you just use the same reasonable set of assumptions. Said differently, if they were proposing a budget for the Board of Education, it would only be $385,000 lower than what we proposed, using all the same assumptions. So lastly, just the takeaways that I have, at least from our budget, and what we're looking to do with our budget is, number one, as everybody knows, maintain our excellence and investing in key areas like the alternative program, which frankly will reduce costs over time. It's also things like maintaining our physical infrastructure and maintaining our programs. Number two, it's defensible just based purely on macroeconomic factors, putting aside everything that all the detailed work that goes into the budget. Number three, we've outperformed our peers in controlling costs over the past decade. Number four, our per pupil costs, as I walked through, are average for the area, so we're not spending more on a per pupil basis than we should be. Our employee number has grown in line with students. The budget increases I walked through is largely contractual, and the rest is to continuously improve the schools and what we offer to our students. And as I said, it's really largely consistent with the Selectmen's proposed budget, and it's that $385,000 differential that I outlined. It's not $1 million. $1 million is not even close to what the Board of Selectmen have proposed. And frankly, it ignores the realities of our budget. It ignores macroeconomics. And I think it frankly would do a disservice to not only our students, our school system, but also the town. So leave it at that. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Brendan. This was a really thoughtful piece and takes a lot of the language that everybody's been using and really consolidates it in a way that I think is important for people to see, because I think sometimes a picture tells a story much better than words do, and I think this is really helpful. Does anyone have any questions or comments about Penny?
So I just had a question on the Board of Selectmen budget. Who are you actually including? What groups are you including within the Board of Selectmen budget?
It's all the it's everything that rolls up to their total number, so their headline number. It's frankly took a long time to calculate it all.
Wow.
To break it all out.
Yeah, thank you.
But, yeah.
Yeah.
So it
it's
includes fire,
police, fire, yes.
everything. So
Yeah.
it's basically the rest of the budget.
Correct.
The Board of Ed,
Yeah,
and
it
then-
doesn't include sewer, and there are a few other line items that it doesn't include, but.
Yeah, that's usually an in and out anyway, so
Exactly.
that should net to zero, the sewer
Exactly.
fund usually, so. Sherry?
So I just want to thank Brendan and the Resources Committee, not only for this presentation, but really for your year-round diligence in providing us with your insightful analysis and your review and your guidance in this area, because I think it's incredible to have that and, you know, that independent voice. And I think, like Deanna said, that you've summarized this so well, you know, because I think a lot of people start to get lost in the numbers, and I think, you know, you're really forcing this big step back question of where did this 2% edict come from? And you're pointing out that, you know, our school district has, over a long period of time, delivered excellence in education, as proven by our top of the state and among the top of the nation test scores and rankings, that we've delivered cost performance, and we have contractual increases built in. So you are really forcing a very important, let's take a step back and question where this 2% edict came from. And really, I hope the Board of Finance is really thinking about the trade-offs of, you know, making such large cuts to a system that has consistently delivered excellence in education. We need to continue to invest in order to continue to deliver those results. So thank you for this, though. This is extremely helpful.
Jen?
And can I just add, I mean, thank you. This is amazing. I need to go home and study it. But one thing, like at the end, when you said like everything we've built for decades, I mean, even just when I was with a bunch of parents the other day, and Brian happened to be there, and one of the things he said was, you know, we have built this like amazing school system, and we are like finally at this point where they feel like everything is in place, and to go in, everything that we've built and grown to get here, and to have to take away is going to be, it's really going to affect everyone. So that was awesome. So thank you for doing that.
Maria?
I agree, that's great analysis, but I do, you know, I think the perception is that we're not willing to even, you know, I'm hearing things about transportation costing less than other districts and insurance costing less. And, you know, I know we have this extra half a gym credit that our kids are taking, which is a staff member, you know, so it's here today, it's not a requirement. There are places that I think we should be looking that won't affect the quality of our programming. I don't think anyone wants to affect the quality. Everybody respects our teachers, you know, and I think our teachers are, you know, proud to work in our district. So, you know, I think households, someone was telling me they stopped contributing, you know, I don't want to get personal, but there are reasons that homeowners are having to cut back, and it's because of what's coming down the road in the future with less tax deductions, you know, higher costs everywhere. I don't think it's asking too much to see if there's a way we can get something cheaper from somewhere else without cutting the programming.
Brendan?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that we should be, you know, diligent in how we spend our money, and to the extent that, you know, the Board of Finance is asking for us to reduce the budget request, I think we should respond to that, but I think we should do it thoughtfully, and I think that the ask of the Board of Ed should actually reflect what we're providing, what we've provided and built over a long period of time, and not just say, save $1 million, because I think that really ignores what we've built and what we've done. It's way too large of a number, you know, relative to everything I just walked through. You know, if you start adding up some of the things which I know Brian's prepared to discuss, it can help, but it's never going to get to $1 million without significantly and negatively impacting what we do in the New Canaan Public Schools.
Anyone else? Penny?
I'm always willing to look at proposals and what other districts are doing if there are ways that we can save money. And so if you have specific suggestions, I think that'd be great to forward them on to the superintendent. I consider this budgeting as a year-round effort. We don't just do this just during budget season. We are working on the budget when we do every single contract with our different union groups, trying to keep the cost to a reasonable and as low a level as possible. So I'm all for, and I know that we talk with other CFOs within the district and compare notes, but we can always do better. Personally, I think the budget that we put forward, I've been looking at about, this is the 11th budget I've looked at, is a very reasonable and modest proposal. It takes the educational infrastructure system that we put in place that provides excellence for all students, allows for educational leadership so that we can continue to help and encourage each of our teachers and administrators to do the very best that they can. And in that way, we are sort of self-learning and growing as a district ourselves. So we've created this actually beautiful infrastructure, which is, I think, one of the reasons that we're one of the premier districts in Connecticut. And we also have fabulous extracurricular activities. And as everybody knows who's had a kid that goes through the system, a lot of times it's that extracurricular activity that really sparks your child's interest, as well as a particular class or something, and engages them and gets them to move forward in school. And so we have this. And what this budget does is it basically, as Brendan has showed in these charts and as Dr. Lutzy's presentation did, it just moves it forward 1 year. I mean, the one program that we're talking about expanding is the alternative high school, which I actually think would save us money over time. And then other than that, we're really just sort of working around the edges. In addition to that, we are always as a district looking for ways to save funds with respect to electricity and utilities, and we have done enormous amounts of work over the last 5 years. We have the CO2 monitors system, which allows us, and I think we can get Dan Clark to explain it in detail, to save a lot of money. We've included, I know at Saks, because we've had to move them, we included building management systems that save us a lot of time, allow us to pull power during non-peak hours, so we pay less for it. So we've been very proactive in terms of all different parts of our budget. We've collaborated with the town wherever it made sense to save money. So this is a modest budget. I mean, it's a lot of money, and I understand it, but we have a lot of students in the district. And I think that we should be very careful to make any significant cuts to it or recommend them as a Board of Education, because it's that little bit extra of effort that you get from your teachers, that you get from your administrators, that makes our district so special and creates such a wonderful educational experience for all the students here. So I think I understand the budget pressures that the town feels under. I know Connecticut has issues. I know SALT is going to hurt a lot of people in New Canaan, but I think that our job is to produce the budget that we need sort of at a reasonable level to keep this excellent education. I think we've done that this year.
Anyone else? I'd just like to add, I think there's been a lot of hyperbole in the community right now, because when you really look at the 10 years of the Board of Education's budget and its percentage of the town's overall budget, for 10 years we have been at 69% of the town's overall budget. That has not changed, which means that our growth is mirroring the town's growth. There's no difference. So, and we have a much bigger percentage of fixed costs in our budget than the other, as Brendan pointed out, with our 75% of our, costs excluding insurance being labor and contractually obligated labor. So I think that we have been more than responsive to the community's desire for us to eke out every dollar in the best interest of our kids. The other thing I think that is being overlooked in this whole argument is that, we have been good stewards and good cooperative partners with the town. we've found many ways to cooperate to lower expenses, whether it be, bringing the town into our munis contract and license so that, to lower the costs for everybody on that kind of work. Last year, we went out jointly on insurance bidding, and so, both of us are benefiting from that collaboration. I think we've also had, we work together on the wide area network within the district and within the community, so, to lower the costs for everyone. And I think, it's easy for people without doing their homework to say, oh, the Board of Ed costs are out of line, or, but we really have been good partners. And when, we aren't always going to agree when, someone makes a suggestion for how, they think that our budget should be, reduced. And, but I would say that everyone in here, I don't see, we're all taxpayers. We all have skin in the game here. And, I think, I know a few of us, I won't have anyone in the school system next year. I know Hazel doesn't, Penny doesn't. We still are, being thoughtful about what's important for this district, and at the end of the day, what's good for these schools is good for everybody. It's good for your homes. I mean, this is what differentiates this community. You don't invest in the school system here, we could be Stanford or Norwalk or Danbury or, another community. So I think people need to really kind of reevaluate sort of, I would use the word hyperbole in this budget season, so. Okay, anyone else? Hazel?
I think everybody's done such a good job of filling in every detail that we talked about. I only wanted to say, just going back again and saying, thank you, Brenda, for doing what you did. It is so clear, the presentation. I think that a lot of people will understand that haven't understood in the past and want to understand. And rather than just taking things out of the air, you've really made it concrete. A very good teacher, the highest compliment I can give.
The son of teachers.
His son of teachers. His parents would be proud.
Okay, Penny.
I just want to make one more point, because I don't think it's actually gotten a lot of play this budget year, and I just wanted to remind the community and the town bodies about it, and that is the number of unfunded mandates we get from the state. They're a huge number, and it's school climate, the anti-bullying legislation, and these are wide-ranging responsibilities. For example, with the anti-bullying legislation, if you have two students who are on vacations in different states outside Connecticut, and a bullying incident occurs, but you can say there's going to be an impact, back in the school environment, then the administrators at New Canaan Public Schools are responsible for dealing with it. So that is and as you can imagine, sorting those types of things out takes a lot of time. Another unfunded mandate is response to intervention, and then we have special education mandates. We have mandated teacher evaluations for every teacher every year. I think prior boards of education only were evaluating what they perceived as the best teachers every 3 years. Well, under the state system, you're not allowed to do that. You have to evaluate every teacher every year. I think with our system, with the presentation we got, we've turned that into something advantageous, where we're using it as a way to motivate every student every year. But it's still a lot of administrative time that it takes on. So I actually just really wanted to say that I think that our administrators are doing work that touches the student within the classroom every single day. And if you're cutting administrative, if people talk about, they kind of throw, oh, there are too many administrators, just cut some of them, then you're actually affecting the educational experience that every student has. Because these administrators work really hard. They come in at crisis times. They deal with disciplinary issues. And if you can, having been a litigator and gone to the facts of situation, if you're trying to figure out like what's right and what's wrong in a situation, that takes a lot of time. And you want to have a judicious, appropriate resolution for all those types of things that arise. So there is not an easy head count to cut. We've arrived at this head count really through years and years of supervision and discussion. And I just wanted to point that out again, all these mandates, particularly these unfunded state mandates, that we have to comply with. And if you don't comply with them, you can get into real trouble and legal suits, and we have been very fortunate to avoid those in large part in New Canaan.
Maria?
I agree. I know the mandates have been, they've had a huge impact on everything, and that's why salaries have increased. And I had asked a few years, when I first got on the board, I do wish we would keep track of the cost of unfunded mandates because, just like the student data privacy, we made that known to legislators that that was a burdensome mandate. The extent to which you implement mandates is one thing. The cost is another thing. I mean, it's a whole system. We have to look at the whole system. We should give the state feedback. I know the teacher evaluation plan kind of crashed and burned, but New Canaan developed its own that really had meaning, which is great, but it also has a cost. So just like every other mandate, they are good ideas, but the extent to which you meet them is one thing. You have to manage the costs by keeping track of them, and I wish we would do that. I know the state, I don't think they have any idea what they've done with all these mandates and how much it has made our budgets grow. So I really agree. I know some of them are very good, but I do think we should be looking at our budget from the perspective of where we're spending money in what areas by mandate.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Brendan. All right. Well, that, poor
Tough
Dr.
transition on this
Lottie
one.
and the administration. We're moving into our scheduled budget discussion.
But that's okay, because it really does build the context very importantly and valuably. As you know, last week, we were with the Board of Finance on Tuesday night and had a conversation and went through, the list of questions and dialogue about those questions in further detail. And then towards the end of the meeting, we talked about, they talked about reductions, right? Reductions to the request, to be clear. And they were really looking for some guidance, I think, from the Board of Education around what those could look like in a way. I did receive an email, the following morning asking about $1 million, and that's where the $1 million number, comes from. And I know that that's been discussed as well. So what we did on Wednesday of that following day, the day after the meeting, I asked the building principals and some district administrators to clear their calendars in the afternoon as best they could. We rescheduled a couple of meetings. We had a full administrative council meeting that was scheduled that afternoon that we wound up canceling so that we could pull everybody together for this purpose. And we spent a good number of hours really sort of, working through and thinking through and doing what we do. The resultant list here that you have is, and I'll speak to it briefly, is what we were able to sort of consider and put together. I do want to remind, I know the board knows, but just remind everybody that, when we bring forward the budget in January, that the superintendent's budget and then becomes the Board of Education's budget at the next meeting, is the result of months and months of hard work. It's careful consideration. Brendan, as I think you showed in the presentation, and something we've been saying from the start is we really work very hard to bring in a budget that sustains the excellence that we have. We look for a few high leverage improvement areas that we can resource reasonably. And we look for every efficiency we can. Penny named a couple. There certainly are others. We have looked at the transportation, for instance. We looked at our in-house transportation. We talk about the white vans that we have. We've looked to see, well, what would it take to move as many students as we move and try to have another organization do that for us. It would cost us more money as we looked at that, just due to the sheer volume of kids that we're moving each day. And it would also, I think, decrease the quality of that service. So that's something that we looked at. We look at other things. We negotiate our contracts very, very carefully. Electricity is another contract that we've negotiated very carefully a couple of years ago. All of them. We mentioned again mandates. With our last negotiations with our teachers, we went to arbitration with the group. Which, as you know, is the last step in negotiations as we go. But we did that because we felt that it was very important to negotiate, as hard as we could. And so we take it very seriously. And so when we bring forward that budget in January, that is the result of months of work. And it is a complex system, as we look at all of it. So, to talk about, well, can you come down $1 million? Boy, that's That's a lot of time and thought and work and effort, conversation, sort of looking for what the maybe unanticipated consequences could be. We're saying, what about, minimize the impact but take out X amount of dollars? That's a really careful analysis. So what you have here is some good work that we've done and we've been thinking about. And I'm comfortable sharing with you tonight, as we think about it. But really to go beyond this is, will take some time, if we're required to do so. Because it is, as you've mentioned, we get into the system itself, and different things that will impact. So what we're able to find, and I'll go to the page briefly, and then we can talk further. The first one is something that we would have been able to take regardless, so we're very happy about that. Last week, Joanne met with Tom Stadler, and they had some updated rates for our workers' compensation premiums. So good news there, we have a 5% reduction. So that 5% reduction is the $106,841. So we're able to reduce by that amount as we think about sort of that budget request. We have to build an assumption in, and I think I know this comes in part at the urging of the Board of Finance, that the turnover savings number. We're always careful, and we have to call it an assumption, because if we assume too much in that budget and it doesn't come to pass, well, then we certainly have to make up the difference from somewhere else. So this year we were within a razor's edge, right, with that. So we have to be careful. We have as we know, the trends have been, with one small year, we've had about 10 or so teachers retiring for the last couple of years. But as we look across the district, we currently have 89 teachers who are not tenured in our district, which means they've joined our district in the last 4 years, typically. That's a lot of turnover. And again, we talk about Temple and work and everything that we're doing with that. The non-tenured teachers are the most intense as far as number of meetings and work we do. So we have 89 teachers in that category. So that to me, could signal that we might have fewer retirements in the next couple of years, as we look at it. At this point, we know of a couple, but no more than that. But we can take that assumption, just given what we've seen happen in the past. We had in this budget $103,000 for maintenance projects. I think there are 10 maintenance projects or so that were, of a certain cost. And these are things that are important for us to do. They were small enough that we didn't think that they would be appropriate for capital, so we built them in here. And that's something that we can defer. We'll get a couple of them done as we can, if we can. But in general, they're things that do need to be done in order, for our facilities. But it's something that, again, the goal is to find, where can we reduce? And so these are some of these places, the areas that we found. Another one is Deanna mentioned we share the wide area network with the town. We do, and actually we share routers and switches, and it's really a very good efficiency, both of the hardware as we go, and the expertise, right? So they lean on us for some things, we lean on them for some things. We work together, I think, very, very well in that way, so we're able to pool our expertise and use the equipment. We do pay the town a charge per port, and last year that charge, as you'll recall, jumped up. I think it was about $15,000 or so, something. I don't have the number right in front of me. But this year it's going up again, and so I would just question the town on that one, so I had to put it on the list. Because, we have a great partnership here, but it's 2 increases in 2 years of a sizable amount is certainly something worth putting on the list and continuing that conversation about.
That's right. Technology prices always come down, don't they?
That's
They
right.
don't go
That's
up.
right.
Should be.
Yes. And, again, we share those resources of that, so. But anyway, put it on there. So then other possible areas for reduction, and again, I think somebody mentioned about you're trimming around the edges, and that's really what we're looking to do. As we looked at it and talked it through and looked at some of those big drivers, we negotiate our transportation contract, as with our buses, our DATCO buses. When that contract came up about a year ago, we looked around and found that districts that went out to bid for a new contract were 7, 10, 15% were some of the bids the best bids that they were getting in as they were looking at it. So we negotiated directly with DATCO, and we're able to do it at, just under 3%, which is pretty good, very good, compared to what, as we look around, and what some of those other costs are. And they were able to do that because, you know, they've already got the operation up and running versus somebody new who would come in and have to get up from scratch. And at the same time, we're flipping out those buses, remember, to go to propane buses. So next year, we'll have another third of the buses, and then the third year of the contract, we'll have our entire fleet will be propane, cleaner, quieter, a little less expensive on fuel. So it was a win-win. But those are the kinds of things that we look at. You know, we're going into renegotiation with our copier contract this year with, you know, paper, not paper, but print center and the copying. We're going to look to, you know, hopefully find some savings in there. That's the document reproduction and printing services. Darlene's been looking at the extended school year program and a couple of changes that she can make there around the programming that would save us a little bit. We have an allocation for unanticipated facilities repair. We've already budgeted it a bit lower than what our trend has been the last couple of years, but you know, we're looking to find what we can. Of course, the rain that we had on Friday told us that we really need to move on these roofs.
Yeah, I saw like 2 guys up on the Saks roof today in big
Yeah,
yellow. I thought, what are they doing?
We had, across at our 3 elementary schools, we certainly had plenty of garbage pails and buckets, you know, collecting the water and doing what had to be done. You know, that we've deferred them already, you know, so we start them next year, I know, as a big project, but, you know, we look at all of those, can we go another year? Can we get one more out of it? And again, after the rainstorm, I think that would be unwise as a result. So, but we're looking at that. We've talked about the learning management program, you know, with the group here, and one of the things we've looked at doing, instead of sort of looking at a more full implementation of that, we can do that as a smaller scale pilot in a couple of grades. I think there's such advantage to that for our students, for our teachers, for our parents. You know, it's really that communications platform of what's happening, and it really does. There's lots of good things to it, but we'll phase it in as a pilot. The media management software initiative, that's something, you know, any organization is creating tons and tons and tons of content now, and you need something to manage that content in order to make it accessible. We have our film class, we have our NCTV, we have the athletics that are going on, we have the videos of our concerts, and we have so much content that's being generated all of the time, and so this is a way to try to manage that, to catalog it, and then make it available on demand to students, to families, to parents, to others, and be able to also use it in our classrooms and do something. So it's, I think, a great idea, but if we have to look to defer it, then again, we're looking at, again, those high leverage areas that we can resource reasonably that will keep moving us forward, but as we look at this, we see that maybe that's something we have to forestall. And then we look at materials and supplies. We had something for recruiting. Actually, it was with Gallup. You know, no one's done more surveys than Gallup, and they have so much data around quality candidates and identifying those candidates and doing work. They have data with onboarding and all those things. So we were looking at a product that other school districts use, some, and Gary's used it before in Fairfield, for instance. And that instrument there's a screen that's involved where, you know, an initial application, and people go through a series of questions, and they use the data that they've collected over 30 years and over 2 million surveys to sort of help to inform whoever's making the hiring decisions around who to move forward, and questions to ask and follow up and those things. So powerful to do. It's very competitive environment right now, and I think will be for the foreseeable future. I don't think we have the pipeline as strong as it has been, especially in the higher positions. You know, when we get into administrative positions and others, it's a challenging environment to find the best people. So this was going to help us to do that, but again, we have to wait a year. And then looking at conferences and travel district-wide to see you know, where we can save. So if we're going through all of this, and these couple of things at the top here, we believe that we can get to, you know, approximately $500,000. That's again, in the context of sort of a complex, I don't know, 700 lines, how many we have as we go through, and we, you know, went through each one. The principals went home and went all the way back to, you know, October, November, and started to kind of work through their pages and think through about each of the requests and, you know, where we could be. So it's a lot of good work, I think, on all of their parts, and you know, that's where we are as far as this is concerned. The other thing I did want to talk to the board about, and certainly open for discussion on this, is, you know, the boards have been talking about thinking differently about budgets and budgeting and what have you. And, you know, one of the things that we've been thinking about, and I thought about it a little bit, was the goal of what, the feedback and guidance from the Board of Finance. I think in part the goal is to develop more, or to build more sort of predictability into budgeting. And certainly a laudable goal. I get that, right? We all want that. So one way, thinking about how can we do that? What's causing these big swings? So last year we were at a 1.6, right? We were one of the lowest around. We did really very well. It was a good budget, and we resourced the things that we need to resource. But this year we're looking at a 3.48, and so why the swing? And we start thinking about insurance, right? I mean, it really is it's the insurance experience that we're having. So last year we had positive insurance experience, and we're able to sort of use some of those funds to supplant operating budget, bring that down a bit. This year we're having the opposite experience, so we have to put more money into that insurance, and so we're swinging up and down. And I started even looking through the documentation from last year, and if you'll recall, last year the Board of Ed, we did ask the Board of Finance to leave $500,000 of that in the Internal Services Fund to help in this because of the cyclical nature of insurance. And we had talked about it when we really shared that we believe this would be a wise thing to do because you just don't know how it'll go. But they made the decision, and it's certainly fine to say, well, we want to capture the savings in the year that we can capture it. And that's perfectly legitimate and fine too. And so I can see, can understand that. However, it puts us where we are today, right? So there's that swing with the insurance and that idea that when you are a self-funded group, you are going to have these big swings that can have this kind of an impact on your operating budget, unless you allow that fund to build up a bit when you have good experience to then use for when the opposite happens. Which again, the town, and it's a fine approach to take. I think many do take that same approach to say, let's capture the savings in the insurance, let's use it to supplant some of the budget and bring down that year. So what we were thinking, and I began a conversation with the first selectman about, was to take the insurance component in the operating budget and to really pull it out of the budget and to talk about it and think about it in essence like a third kind of bucket. So we have our operating budget and we have our capital budget. So then third would be to take the insurance and talk separately about the insurance budget. In good years, if the town so chose, I believe that the resources, the funds in there could still be available to supplant some of the charge for the operating budget. So it would still work the same way. But it wouldn't be part of this bigger discussion as far as the year-to-year costs. Because those numbers, I mean, we were at the Board of Finance meeting and heard Joe, who shared that we've had a poor month, and we might have another poor month. And what that might mean is another $300,000 to $500,000 added into our operating budget. I mean, that's after I got my heart started again. Realized that that's a backbreaker when we start thinking about predictability in an operating budget for a Board of Ed. So does that make sense the way that I've explained it? So I would like your feedback on that a little bit, just to know, yes, continue that conversation, because it's not a one-year thing. I think we would look to do it this way in the future. Then we can really focus on costs that are more within our control in a way. Some of them, they're contractual, of course, but again, for instance, when we negotiate, they're results of our negotiations. We've gone to arbitration when we had to. We've gone to mediation with other groups as we've had to, and I think we're fair but firm in our negotiations, and that's, I think, the goal. So we own that at the end, whatever the results are. But that insurance number can just swing. And, we've got our individual stop loss at $300,000 per person. So a family of 3 is a $1 million liability. And we've got so many folks, over 650 folks who are on there. So it just seems like it would help us to build predictability into the budget. So feedback would be appreciated on that.
Okay. Brendan?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was one page in my presentation, so I'm absolutely supportive of that. I don't think it's funding a balance sheet item, and it will go up and down and swing both for us and the town. So I just think it makes sense to pull it out and focus on what we actually can control, although there still will be differences between our budget and the town's, for some of the reasons I stated.
Maria?
I mean, would we consider not doing a self-funded? That seems to be the risk. Or would you?
We do look at it. The idea of the self-funded is over time you'll have more you'll come out ahead, right? You'll have more good years than bad years, but the bad years can hit you hard. But most groups are going self-funded if they're not already, because they have found that they have more control over those costs and the plan design and other things. But, we are preparing for negotiations with our teachers, so we'll be looking at it again, as we do every time.
Is the risk dependent on the population that you're like, are there years or populations that are less risky so that you could go self-funded versus populations, that are, I don't know. I don't know to me, it sounds like a little bit of a risk. Again, it's sort of a gamble.
Well,
So
I
don't
think
know.
I like to step in because I've done a lot of work on this we worked with the town on this as well. And the way the self-funding, it's sort of like a statistical, you in a 5-year period, you're going to probably win 3 out of 5 years. And we saw last year the benefit of being self-funded. I mean, we were able to take our budget down by $700,000 or $800,000. So you have to be in it for the long haul. You can't look at it in 1 year. And so if you looked at this over 5-10 years, we're going to win, but you are going to have variability. And you can't go in and out unless the town decides they were going to keep the reserve, because the cost to, once you spend down the reserve that we've put in place, the town would have to budget millions of dollars, millions, to be able to have you go
Tens of
back
millions,
into
yeah.
to a self-funded plan. It makes no sense at all. And so you have to, I've seen the emails. It's a 1-year problem. It could be a 2-year problem. But over the long term, we win in this situation. And Penny.
Just to say that, the current insurance, our consultant and our prior insurance consultant have all said that as a district, we have saved millions of dollars by being self-funded for insurance. And, I mean, the truth is you have good years and you have bad years and they average out. But the other thing is if you're not self-funded, then that means you're paying a profit to an insurance company. So they're taking all the same data that you have. They're going through all the same calculations. They're figuring out their line item very similarly to how we figure out our line item, and then they're tacking on their profit. So you're immediately, by going self-funded, you're getting that extra line, that profit line out of there. And it's not, I mean, the risks are mitigated a little bit, by very important insurance considerations that we still get. So we still get the individual stop loss and we still get the aggregate stop loss. So we're not just, we have variability, but it's variability within a certain bucket, within a certain guideline. And so I think the town's just gone self-funded. I don't think we'd ever want to move away from that, as long as we have our great credit rating, because we're saving money.
Sherry?
So just in my 5th year on the board, and the 5th, I've heard all the same consultants say we definitely have to stay with the self-funded plan, and I absolutely support that suggestion to pull out the insurance budget, especially because my observation after being on the board for 5 years, there seems to be short institutional memory in this town. So I think we would be much better served by pulling it out and having that separate discussion more clearly.
Hazel?
Since we have had conversations about this, I did bring my Tom Mooney book, because I think this is a good suggestion you're bringing forth, and I don't know if I should read the passage so everyone will have it locked into their minds, that it's very serious to us. Local school districts operate on an annual funding budget basis, and the local boards of education have no authority to operate in a deficit. School board members are school officials who authorize expenditures in excess of the funds appropriated to the Board of Education, theoretically face personal liability for such expenditures. Connecticut General Stat 7-349. There are no reported cases, however, of personal liability for authoring in good faith expenditures that operate a deficit. So that's sort of something that I think keeps some of us awake and could ruin a marriage if you let that be known in your family.
And just so if anybody's watching at home, what Hazel's referencing is the fact that we ask the town, we have an agreement with the town that we hold 60% of our potential liability on our insurance in our insurance on our, in our operate.
corridor.
Yeah, the corridor. It's in our internal services fund. We used to hold all of it, and so now we hold 60% and the town holds 40%. And, you know, as Sherry said, institutional memory is very short around here. And so, you know, that was a very, it was negotiated over months and months to come to this agreement. And it's not a perfect agreement, but, you know, we got comfortable. And to have the Board of Finance and First Selectman, you know, look to, with the stroke of a pen, remove that agreement is a little heart-stopping for those of us who've been through this process multiple times. And so I would say, as we go through this process, I don't think that that's an area that we want to negotiate at all. At least I would personally not want to, and I know where Hazel stands.
It's a heavy book, and I lugged it all at night to get it to you.
So, anyway. Penny?
So if we were just done with the insurance, I wanted to go back to these areas of reduction, because I had a couple of questions with them, and would wanted to suggest for the board some, and the administration, maybe a couple of changes that we might make to it. And one would be that I just am very uncomfortable as a Board of Ed member taking out the allocation for unanticipated facilities repairs. And we've had years, we had the year where the front of Saks started peeling off right before school, and we had to fix it. You know, we've had
What's that, gas
other-
line?
other
The oil
areas.
line?
And so I think that I don't know, I forget what that line item is, but I would want to keep that in our budget, because I believe we've expended that every year. You can go back and look, but I think honestly, we know we have old enough facilities that we know that something is going to go wrong somewhere in our facilities budget, and I would want to put that back in. I guess, and I'm on the conferences and the travel district-wide, I think one of the important things we do is we go out and we get new ideas, and we're always looking 5 and 10 years ahead as to where we have to be, and that's one of the things that makes us a premier district. So I don't know how much money you've taken out of that, but I'm a little concerned that I think that that's a really excellent practice. And I also wanted to make certain that none of the money was coming out of the school counseling budget for that, because I know we send our school counselors to see colleges and to sell our students, and if I would be very much against any of that money coming out. And I had just one more comment, and I think actually with the wide area network, I'm going to guess that the town didn't want to charge us, and they had some unanticipated charges. So, which is, I think, what you were guessing. So,
Absolutely.
so what I think I would do is, if we're going to offer some changes out of the $500,000, I would take out the $27,000. I would take out the unanticipated facilities repair, whatever the board wants on the conferences and travel district-wide, and I would come up with a lesser number, and then I would list as other item to consider the wide area network charge of $27,000, but I wouldn't include it in the 500. So those are my comments.
I was
Sherry.
going to respond to what Penny said. I think that's fine to the editorial note, but I think it needs to be said that we're not approving any of these. I think, you know, Dr. Lutzy and the administration went through, I think, at the request of the Board of Finance, a productive exercise. But I think this shows how difficult it would be. Again, back to, you know, Brendan taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture. These, you know, even after this exhaustive review, you know, is nowhere close to $1 million. And that really is the point of this page. And I just want to confirm that we're not approving any of these today, because I would need to have more detail on all of these to get comfortable. But I know you did your best to kind of try to identify an exhaustive list of where the cuts could come from. And again, it's nowhere near $1 million. And that really is the message that we need to leave the Board of Finance with.
Yeah, actually, Sherry, I'm glad you bring up that point, because it is important to note ultimately the budget will be approved by the board. We generally, because of the changes that happen in the budget and as things go, generally those final things are brought forward in late May, you know, as we look at it. It's after the Board of Finance has done what made the adjustments they have to do, and then after the town council, as you know, who can reduce but can't add, the town council has the final budget. Then administrative team will again get together, work through, figure this out, and then bring it before the Board of Education for review, discussion, and change, modification, anything else until the board, ultimately approves it. But, it's to lock in on these things prior to having that final number is, I think, it's very, very difficult, and I think it's unwise. We're going to keep looking at things, but until the Board of Education has a number and the administration has a number to work with, so we can make recommendations to the Board of Ed that, are grounded in fact instead of in, hypothesis or theory, then that's when we can move things forward. So these are, right, we took a hard look at things, we looked at some things that we could bring forward, but we wouldn't have hard numbers to any of it until we have the actual number that the Board of Ed is going to be looking at next year.
Jen?
So, I'm just gonna ask this because, so what happens tomorrow? So they're voting, Board of Finance is voting on Thursday.
Yes.
And, I know the talk right now in the paper and on the street is the $1 million number. And I don't know if you're prepared to even go there. However, we have 2 really important meetings this week. Can you throw out potential, I know this is just trimming the edges, but what happens if it's that $1 million number?
So we're looking at
that at
program
all?
reduction. You look at program reduction, and you're going to look at, it'll be in program, it would be in staffing in different ways, but that's something that would have to really work through. The part of the challenge was, can you get to $1 million without reducing program? And the answer to that is no.
Right.
You can't. We're fortunate with our workers' comp, but that could have gone the other way. And the assumption around the turnover, and then the maintenance project. So there's $300,000, those 3 items that, again, even the maintenance project, we're just deferring that. It's not that we don't have to do that.
Right.
These are all things that are going to have to be done. We can defer it and try to do what we've been doing and, hit as we
Yeah.
can. But, to go beyond this, you're talking about, reduction in programs and staffing.
Right. I think your presentation today, Brennan, was amazing, and I think it's important, from reading the paper and just hearing what people are talking about, it's the 2%, but really looking at the numbers and where we are and what's going to happen, is just
Right, and so
important for everyone
if
to
we
know.
pull that insurance out, if I speak with a few other folks who were able to do that, then here, we're pretty close. With what we're talking about here, we're pretty close to 2%, without the insurance number. So that, to me, changes the conversation as well. And then we'll get to that 2%, if without the insurance. But the insurance is such a big driver in this that, we're going to be losing program and staff in order to fund insurance, is really how it's going to go.
By the way, I support taking that out of the budget, too. I never got that in.
Hazel?
Each of these things, as you've said, is a traumatic thing, not traumatic, but dramatic in many cases, something to pull away. I remember when maybe Penny remembers too, when we began cutting maintenance, and it reached a point that was pretty bad. And we finally had to do a tour of people that were in various responsibilities to come and see it, because nobody would have believed it. The worst thing that stands in my mind still is going into the kindergarten class where there's a plunger in the corner for the toilet because they needed it every day. That was the worst. Although I must say the auditorium, watching people sit down, which I did see one night, but a person sat down behind me and the entire seat fell apart. She fell in the back. It's a miracle we didn't get sued, and thank goodness she didn't get hurt. So that each of these things on here is something we can't just throw it away and say, well, we're not going to do it unless we all of us get our hammers and nails and get out on Saturday and learn a lot more about taking care of maintenance, I guess.
Right.
Maria?
I actually think this is a good list, and I had asked about the list of conferences and workshops, which was mentioned in the budget. I know you were working on that, but, I would think if you, scale back on conferences, are you also then scaling back on substitutes? And I understand that by giving teachers the opportunity to attend these, it makes them better teachers. I totally get that. So maybe there are alternative ways like online workshops after school, something that doesn't take them away from students and saves us money at the same time and still meets the objective of giving them, I mean, we are the technology age. I'm sure there's lots of, webinars. And so I appreciate that. I think that's, I think we have to be creative. I don't think there's any way around it.
Brendan?
Can you give us a sense as to the types of maintenance projects that would be deferred?
Sure.
Thanks.
On page 20 of the budget book, there's a listing of them. I think there's a total of 15. So they include things like cafeteria tables at the schools, and it's just an entry of one of a 5-year plan. Replacing doormats in the front of each of the schools, they're worn down, and a lot of debris gets tracked into the schools. Hand dryers in the bathroom, so we can reduce our supply account for paper towels. We thought that was a good idea to do that. Window treatments in the libraries. Like at the high school, we don't have window treatments in the back that are functional, and it's a security concern for us, so we wanted to do that. We have a booth in technology. We want to do a spray painting booth there. And that's basically the list, spread out amongst the schools.
Thanks.
There was a corresponding reduction in paper towels by putting in the hand dryers that we'll have to add back in.
There was 15,000 saved actually by
Right, we're
doing
saving
that.
15,000 in paper towels for $25,000 investment, so in year two,
I mean,
we
that's
start
something
going to the
that
good.
doesn't make any sense
We've
at
got to
all
find the money.
to defer. No, but that, I mean, it just makes no sense to eliminate. I mean, it's sort of like pulling out the alternative program when it makes all the sense in the world educationally, and it will likely save us money over time, but we can't actually show that this year, right? We know, we're virtually certain it's going to show up next year. But, the town bodies don't want to spend money on it this year just because we need to meet a target. It really doesn't make any sense. So maybe try to pull out things like that we know, or put back in things like that we know make financial sense, even if it's a slight increase to cost this year. I mean, that's better for everyone in this town, right?
Long term.
Absolutely.
And the environment.
People are not, I know that I'm going to be here past the end of this year, and virtually everyone else in this town is in the same boat, so.
Anyone else? I think what we're hearing is these are all small dollar amounts. They don't get us to $1 million. They're
No, we get
small
to about half.
amounts. I mean, you are really picking at things that sort of make this a special place. And quite frankly, I'm going to echo Penny's concern about the maintenance things. I mean, I remember at the beginning of the school year, was it last year, we had a big, oil tank problem that was a huge expense, and, it just happens. We have old facilities, and, we can't not budget for things breaking down, because they break down. They're heavily used, and we need the kids to be able to get into the classrooms, and I know we don't want to talk about individual items, but, a number of these items that are on your list are things that make this a place that is, a premier district that, is on the forefront of educational thought, and that's why we are here. People have many choices of places to move that have much lower cost housing options, and they move here for the reasons that, we have in this budget. And, I think it would be a shame. I think it's horribly short-sighted, because it will have a direct impact on the housing prices in this area if we start slipping in the rankings, or having the perception that we don't fund our schools in this town. It will be a direct correlation, and You know, and I think people know that. I don't know why they're not addressing that, you know. So,
Well, and just, if I can just say briefly, I think it's just something I picked up on in our conversation now, and many times you hear boards having conversations about budgets, and they talk about expense. But you've all been using the word investment. And as superintendent, I think I speak for all the administrators, I think that's something that sets this Board of Education apart. You know, they see the costs in our budget as investments, you know, in our kids and our future in town, and that's heartening. It means a lot. Just, you know, the language you use is important. It speaks to our values, and I agree with that. You know, what we put forward is the investment required to sustain and to, you know, again, leverage those couple of high impact places. But it's nice to hear board talking about the investment in the schools. Thank you.
okay. I know if I
So
can get-
I guess what I'm
Penny?
saying, and I don't know if the rest of the board agrees with it, we're not saying we agree with this, but I have to say, as a Board of Ed member, I'm not comfortable presenting it to the Board of Finance, because it's going to look as though the 500,000, it's going to look as though the Board of Ed agrees with it. And so I actually would ask you to sharpen your pencil and take out some of these items and come up with a lesser number, because I think that what we're doing is we're saying, this is the, you know, you're basically saying, this is a number that you think you could live with, where you're going to still provide a premier education, maybe defer a few projects, and some of the things I think we have to have in our budget.
Brendan?
Yeah, I agree with Penny, and, you know, it was a couple of the things that we mentioned. I don't think we have to go through each one of them again, but I think, you know, taking more of a long-term view is important, and I think it's important to show the town that that's what we're doing. We're not, you know, we obviously have to budget on an annual basis, but we're, you know, really investing for the long term and making sure that, you know, all of our resources are spent in the best way, not just solely to an annual budgeting cycle.
Sherry?
Sorry, and I just want to echo that I appreciate that you did this after much pressure from the Board of Finance, and even after, you know, they made sure it got out in the newspapers that the Board of Ed's not responding, blah, blah, blah. But I think we need to send the message back that our board stands firm in advocating for our district and advocating for the investment required to continue to deliver an excellence in education. I mean, we need to stand firm. If we don't advocate for our schools, who will? And actually, you know, I'd like to put a call out to the other town boards to really dig deep and think about what they're doing to advocate for excellence in education, because I think we've all said it, but our town turns on these schools. So there's a lot at risk here.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, everyone. You know, it's important that we have this conversation before we go into tomorrow's meeting. And, you know, I guess 7 o'clock tomorrow is the Board of Finance meeting, so.
And it opens with the public hearing.
Yeah. So anyone interested in, you know, coming out to, you know, make a statement about the school board's budget, please, you know, 7 o'clock tomorrow at Town Hall. So, okay. We have moved on to comments from the public. Anyone wishing to address the board? Seeing none, we will move on to announcements and future business. Dr. Lutzy.
Sure, I have great news. Our VEX robotics program, they did so well in their trip this past weekend that they made it to nationals.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Nice.
which, where did he go? Yeah, congratulations. Is it Kentucky?
No,
It's- where, yeah, I think
Yeah.
it may be
Yeah.
in Kentucky. So, where Jim Zamorano is going to put all that together for the board for next meeting's approval. It's at the end of April, so we have a little bit more time, but not a lot. So we'll bring that next meeting for your review and consideration for them to head out there. It's great news. I think it may be the first time that we've done that, you know, with the VEX robotics program. So very nice. Very happy for Jim and all of the students that participate in that. I know also that Mr. Salvestrini is working on a library technology update for us. And it'll be our second meeting of the month, so we'll have our statement of accounts.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, so I would like to get a motion to adjourn to executive session in accordance with Connecticut General Statutes 1-225. The subjects to be discussed are real estate and security. Penny, second. Jen, all those in favor? It's unanimous. We're adjourned to executive session.